My family ignored me for 31 years because of my heart condition, but when my perfect sister couldn't have kids, they demanded I risk my life as a surrogate and called me selfish. Now they're suing me. I'm 31 years old. I work in real estate, and I need to tell this story because what happened a few months ago still has me processing everything. You know, like trying to understand how we got to this point. I guess I should start at the beginning. When I was born with a heart condition that basically defined my entire childhood and, honestly, probably my entire relationship with my family. I don't remember much from the early years, obviously, but what I do remember perfectly is the constant feeling of being invisible. Like my existence was more of an annoyance than anything else to my parents. My sister Amanda is 2 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, she was the golden child. You know, the one who could do anything, and my parents acted like she'd cured cancer or something. I, on the other hand, was the sick kid, the one who needed constant medical attention, the one who cost money in doctors and medications, and my parents never let me forget that for a second. When Amanda won an award at school, there was a celebration, pictures everywhere, calls to all the relatives. When I got good grades or achieved something despite missing so much school for my medical appointments, it was like, oh, okay, that's good, Jessica. And that's it. Next topic. Do you know what it feels like to grow up knowing that your own parents would prefer you didn't exist? Because I do. And it's something that marks you in ways you can't even explain properly. The only good thing, and when I say the only thing, I literally mean the only thing, were my grandparents. My mom's parents. They were the ones who paid all my medical bills, all my treatments, all the times I had to go to specialists in other cities. My parents never lifted a finger to help financially with my condition. They basically acted like it was my fault for having a defective heart or something. My grandparents also paid for my entire college education because my parents said they didn't have money to send to me to study. But curiously, they did have money to pay for Amanda's new apartment when she turned 22 and to buy her a luxury car when she graduated. I was like 15 or 16 when I realized that my grandparents were basically the only people in my family who actually loved me, who cared about me as a person and not as a burden or a problem to solve. The thing is, when it came time to go to college, I applied to schools as far away as possible from my house. I couldn't take it anymore. You know what I mean? Every day in that house was a reminder that I didn't matter, that my sister was perfect, and I was the disappointment. So I went to a university literally on the other side of the country, like about 8 hours by plane, and it was the best decision I could have made. That's where I met Christopher, my now husband, in my second year of college. He was studying engineering and I was in business administration. We met in an economics class that we both had as an elective, and honestly, it was the first time in my life that someone outside of my grandparents made me feel like I mattered, like I was enough just as I was. Christopher was the first person I trusted enough to tell everything about my family, about how they treated me, about my heart condition and everything that had happened. He couldn't believe it. Like he was shocked when I explained that my parents basically ignored me, and that my whole life I had been the second choice. Or not even that. More like the invisible option. I remember he told me, "That's not normal, Jessica. That's not how a family is supposed to function." And I think until that moment I hadn't fully processed how bad everything was. When you're inside the situation, when you've lived like that your whole life, it normalizes in a strange way, you know? We got married when I was 25. He was 27. It was a small wedding, basically just his parents, my grandparents, some close friends, my parents, and Amanda didn't even come. I sent them the invitation, obviously, because part of me still had that absurd hope that maybe, just maybe, they would want to be there on one of the most important days of my life. My mom called me like 2 weeks before and told me, "Jessica, I don't think we can go. Amanda has an important event that weekend and we need to be with her." And I just said, "Okay, sure, no problem," and hung up. I cried for hours that day, but Christopher was there. He hugged me and told me that his family was now my family too, and that I deserved people who chose me, and not who tolerated me when it was convenient for them. 2 years later, I got pregnant. And honestly, it was terrifying because doctors had warned me my whole life that a pregnancy could be very risky with my heart condition. My cardiologist, Dr. Mitchell, I'd had him since I was a kid, sat down with Christopher and me and explained that there was a real possibility of serious complications, that my heart might not handle the stress of pregnancy and childbirth. But I wanted that baby. I wanted to be a mom more than anything in the world. And after many conversations and many tears, Christopher and I decided to go ahead. It was the most difficult pregnancy you can imagine. I was on almost complete bed rest for the last 4 months. I had to stop working temporarily. There were moments when I literally thought I wasn't going to make it, but I did. I gave birth to my son, a beautiful and healthy boy, and although it was an emergency C-section and I was in intensive care for a week afterwards, we both came out alive, and that was all that mattered. The doctors were very clear after the birth. They told me, "Jessica, you can't have another pregnancy. It would be too dangerous. Your heart wouldn't take it. There's a high probability you wouldn't survive." And I accepted it. I mean, I had my beautiful son, I had Christopher, I had a life that I had finally built for myself away from all the toxicity of my family of origin. My parents didn't even call me when I gave birth. They found out through my grandparents and sent a text message like, "Congratulations, Jessica. We hope you're doing well." And that's it, nothing more. Amanda didn't say anything either. It was like I didn't exist to them unless they saw me in person by accident or something. Things continued like that for a while. Me living my life with my husband and my son, working, being happy for the first time in my adult life. And then my grandfather got sick. He was like 79 years old and they diagnosed him with pancreatic cancer. My grandmother called me crying, told me the doctors gave him maybe 6 months, that she didn't know what to do. And I, without thinking twice, told her that Christopher and I would move back to be close and help her. I know it sounds crazy, like going back to the town where you grew up after years of being away, but my grandparents had given everything for me. You know what I mean? It was the least I could do for them. So we moved back. When my son was like 3 years old, I got a job at a local real estate agency. Christopher was able to work remotely, and we settled in a house about 10 blocks from my grandparents' place. My parents and Amanda still lived in the same town too, but honestly, the first few months we hardly saw them. We'd run into each other at the supermarket occasionally, exchange superficial greetings like, "Hi, how are you? All good. Okay, bye." And that was it. I was busy with my grandfather, spending time with him, helping my grandmother with medical appointments and all that. And honestly, I didn't have the time or emotional energy to deal with the rest of my family. But then something changed. And when I say something changed, I mean that suddenly, out of nowhere, my parents and Amanda started acting like we were a normal family. Like, my mom started inviting me for coffee. Amanda would send me messages asking how my son was. My dad would show up at my house with random excuses like, "I was passing by and thought I'd say hi." At first I was confused, but also, I don't know, maybe hopeful that finally, after a lifetime, they had decided to treat me like part of the family. Christopher wasn't convinced. He'd tell me, "Jessica, be careful. I don't like this. Something feels off." But I wanted to believe that maybe people could change. That maybe seeing my grandfather sick had made them realize the importance of family or something. This was like 6 or 7 months ago. My mom invited me to a family dinner, said she wanted us all to be together, that it had been a long time and that it was important to take advantage of the time with Grandpa while he was still with us. I brought Christopher and my son, and when we arrived, everyone was there. Like my dad, my mom, Amanda and her husband. She had married like 2 years before to a guy who works in finance. The dinner started normal. Food, superficial conversation, my son playing with some toys we brought, but I could feel there was something weird in the atmosphere, like a tension I couldn't quite identify. And then, just as we were finishing dessert, Amanda pulled out a card, like one of those greeting cards but fancier, and passed it to me smiling. She told me, "Jessica, we want to ask you something very special. Open the card." I opened it, confused, and inside there was a long message written by hand by Amanda explaining that she and her husband had been trying to have a baby for years and couldn't, that she was infertile and they had considered all the options. And at the end of the card it said, "And we would love for you to be our surrogate, to help us have the baby we want so much." I sat there with the card in my hands, literally in shock, unable to process what I had just read. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for my reaction, and I could only think, seriously? Are you seriously asking me this? Christopher, who was sitting next to me, read the card over my shoulder, and I saw him tense up. I passed the card back to Amanda and told her, trying to stay calm, "Amanda, I can't do that. You know I can't. The doctors told me another pregnancy could kill me." And she, I swear, looked at me like I had just said the most ridiculous thing in the world, and said, But doctors always exaggerate, Jessica. I'm sure if we get a second opinion, we'll find one who says it's fine. My mom intervened then and said, Jessica, this is an opportunity for you to finally do something for your sister. She's always been there for you. And I almost laughed because, what? Amanda has always been there for me? In what universe? I told her, Mom, this isn't something I can do. It's not that I don't want to. It's that literally my body wouldn't take it. I could die. And my dad, who almost never spoke directly to me about anything important, said in that serious voice he used when he wanted to intimidate someone, You're being selfish, Jessica. Your sister needs your help and all you have to do is this for her. Selfish. They called me selfish for not wanting to risk my life. Christopher stood up from the table at that moment and said, Okay, that's enough. We're leaving. And I stood up too. Amanda started crying, like crying dramatically, saying that I had always been the horrible sister, that I had never done anything for her, that I was selfish and only thought about myself. My mom yelled at me that I owed this to Amanda after everything the family had endured with me and my condition for years. And that phrase, that damn phrase, was like a slap in the face. Everything they had endured for years with me, as if I had chosen to be born with a defective heart, as if it had been my fault. I grabbed my son, Christopher grabbed our things, and we left that house without saying another word. I drove home in silence, with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, and when we arrived and I put my son to bed, I sat on the floor of my room and cried like I hadn't cried in years. Christopher sat with me, hugged me, and let me get it all out. That whole life of feeling less than, of feeling like a burden, of being invisible unless they needed me for something, it all came out that night. My mom texted me the next day, sent me a long message saying we needed to talk, that I had reacted badly, that she understood my concerns, but that I should at least consider the possibility of helping Amanda. She asked me to meet her at a coffee shop near her house. I, stupidly, agreed, because I still had that part of me that wanted to believe that maybe she would understand if I explained it to her calmly. We met 2 days later, and it was basically an hour of her trying to emotionally manipulate me, saying things like, Amanda is devastated, she needs you. If you really loved your family, you would do this for her. Think about how happy your sister would be. I explained to her over and over. Mom, the doctors were clear. Another pregnancy could kill me. It's not an exaggeration. It's not something I can risk. I have a son who needs me. I have a husband. I have a life. And she looked at me and said something I'll never forget. She said, Jessica, you've always been dramatic about your condition. I'm sure if you really wanted to help your sister, you'd find a way. I got up from that table, told her I wasn't going to continue having that conversation, and left. The messages started after that. First from my dad, long texts about how I was a disappointment, how after everything they had endured, I couldn't do this simple favor for my sister. Amanda sent me messages at all hours. Some were pleading like, please, Jessica, reconsider. Others were angry like, you're a horrible, selfish sister. I hope you can live with yourself knowing you destroyed my only chance to be a mother. I blocked their messages after a week because I couldn't take it anymore. Every time I saw a notification from any of them, I felt like my chest was going to explode. My grandmother, who is the only one besides my grandparents who was always decent to me, called me like 3 weeks after all that. She told me she needed to warn me about something, that she had heard my parents talking and they were considering taking legal action against me, like trying to find some way to force me to be a surrogate or sue me for I don't know what absurd reason. She told me, Jessica, be careful. They're very angry, and your dad is talking about lawyers. I panicked. Called Christopher, who was at work. Told him everything. And he immediately said we needed to consult with a lawyer ourselves, too. We went to see a family lawyer 2 days later, explained the whole situation to him, showed him the messages I had saved before blocking them. Everything. He basically told us that legally my parents had no case, that no one can force another person to be a surrogate, that was ridiculous, but that it was good we had documented everything just in case they tried something. He helped us draft a formal letter making it clear that there would be no more conversations about the subject and that any additional harassment would be reported to the authorities. I never thought it would get to the point of needing legal protection from my own family, but here we were. My parents received the lawyer's letter and sent me one last message, one that my grandmother forwarded to me because I had already blocked them. It said something like, Jessica, it's clear you've decided to turn your back on your family. We are deeply disappointed in the person you've become. Don't expect us to be there for you when you need us. And honestly, when I read that, I felt more relief than anything else. It was finally over. I no longer had to keep trying to win the love or approval of people who were never going to see me as enough. I blocked all their numbers, blocked Amanda on all social media, basically cut off all contact. My grandfather died about 2 months after all this, surrounded by my grandmother, Christopher, my son, and me, my parents, and Amanda came to the funeral, but I barely spoke to them. Basically a superficial hello and nothing more. My grandmother hugged me after the service and told me, "Your grandfather would be proud of you for standing up for yourself, for not letting them treat you like that ever again." And that made me cry because it was true. He had always told me I deserved better. Now, about 6 months after all that, my life is infinitely better without them in it. I work in real estate, I'm doing well. Christopher has a job he loves. My son is 5 years old and happy and healthy. I no longer carry that constant feeling of not being enough, of having to prove my worth all the time. Yes, there are moments when I feel guilty, like I wonder if maybe I was too harsh, if I should have tried to explain better. But then I remember that I spent 31 years trying to explain, trying to be seen, trying to matter, and it was never enough. Last week, my son asked me why we don't see my parents anymore, the grandparents from the other side, as he called them. I told him the truth, that sometimes there are people in our lives who don't know how to love us the way we deserve to be loved, and that it's okay to walk away from those people to protect ourselves. He thought for a moment and then said, "But I love you very much, Mommy, and Daddy too, and Grandma too. That's enough, right?" And yes, I told him, "That's more than enough, sweetie. That's all we need."